Okay. So, nice, easy start to the week to begin with, or a nice gentle start to the week, I should say. Just stand in with your feet hip width apart. So imagine these parallel lines going up through your body, feet to hips to shoulders, and then that's a parallel line in the middle. As always, with the hip width stance, you could measure it from the inside of your, from the outside of your foot, or the middle, or the inside, whatever suits you. Remember that we're not all the same structure, so the important thing is to feel that your legs are supporting you. Try and just bring your weight a little bit forwards, and just a slight sort of releasing, something we'll come back to in a few moments. Just slight curve in your knees so that your center of gravity begins to drop, and turn in the center of your body. For people familiar with this, you'll have an idea, hopefully, of kind of how it can feel, and let that be part of your intention. This is what you're moving towards. Anybody new watching this, if you're not familiar with this, this is a very light movement. One of the things that we're trying to develop with the Tai Chi posture is a lack of resistance to the movement. A sense of space within your body for movement, and just allowing whatever movement you're doing at any time to fill that space rather than forcing the movement. And especially as you start off, it's going to take a few moments to develop, giving your body a chance to warm up. Warm up is not just about temperature, it's about the flow of the blood through your muscles. Just letting your heartbeat raise a little bit to get the blood circulating. And at the same time, just bringing your attention into your body through this mechanism of being aware of your posture and your movement, so that there's a feeling, both mind and body, that you're settling, beginning to get that sense of space, not only in the body, but in your mind as well, as you redirect your attention away from those various kind of niggly thoughts that so often arise. Just be aware of areas in your body where there isn't that feeling of looseness beginning to develop. Again, give them time to loosen up, but be aware of them so that you're not pushing against them. So we start to get a sense for movement, for flow within our bodies. You can describe this as movement, momentum. It would include things like your blood, the oxygen circulating around your body, various body fluids. But we can also think in terms of a continual energy that flows through the whole of our body. And we have three areas of attention. Primarily at the start, it's that attention to posture, the mechanics of the movement, so our bodies in general. And then there's the attention itself, our mind, and consider that mind doesn't just mean the thoughts. In arts like Tai Chi, we often use one word to describe what might be several words, or a concept rather than a word. And so in this context, when we talk about mind, we're not just talking about what we often think of as mind, but some people describe it as heart mind. It could include feelings, emotions, memories, and so on. Just just allowing them to settle. And the third element is the movement, the energy. And when we start to bring these three things together, this is what we might refer to as the chi in this context. The harmonization of these three aspects of ourselves so that they begin to work together the way that you had a tripod with a camera on it, as the three legs of the tripod would support each other and be supported by each other. We might choose to put our attention in particular areas at one point, but the ultimate aim is for this harmonization on a physical level, so that the movement is harmonious within our body, but also a sense of harmonious interaction between those three elements. Feel that as you turn in the center of your body, that's the area, the hips and the waist, you can really feel that having an effect all the way through your body. You may feel that there's a bit of movement in your legs. Ideally, we keep our weight 50% in each leg at this point, but you might feel a little bit of movement there. Don't be overzealous in correcting that. Just as always, any corrections that we make are done carefully and gently and patiently. And also, as you turn in the middle of your body, you can stay clear that everything above that area responds. You feel your ribs moving, your shoulders moving, your arms following your shoulders. You're not trying to move your arms, but you're not trying to stop them moving. They're quite passive at the moment. And it's useful to just pay a little bit of attention to your arms and notice what the qualities of that passive movement are, how it affects, for instance, the big muscles of your arms and your shoulders. These are things that we will build upon, but we don't want to lose as we build upon them. You know, we're talking about the foundations in many ways of the whole process. So now, let's take a step back. I'll my hand will disappear. Just turn your hands palm out, raise them up. So now we want to maintain a shape, but not lose that quality of movement that I just mentioned. So we actively try and release and relax in areas like the trapezius muscle across our shoulders. Imagine somebody gently leaning on your shoulders, for instance, so you're less inclined to lift your shoulders up. The big muscles of your arms, biceps, triceps, radial muscle, and so on. And so you notice that my elbows are hanging down below my hands. And don't overextend your arms. Get a sense of opening across the chest, but not strain. And then just letting your hands drop. Put one foot forward to keep the width of the step. You can still see the background between my legs, about the same in length. And still turning in the center of your body, but now also moving your weight. Probably find that your body will respond to the change in your weight by turning in response, usually towards the direction that your foot is pointing in. Soften your knees. So at no point do we want our knees to lock up. And again, just trying to get the muscles working. Trying not to stiffen up in quadriceps, hamstrings, the calf muscles, and so on. So again, trying to get that feeling of releasing, relaxing in those areas as much as you can to allow a sense of fluidity in the movement of your weight. And whether this is your first time or your 101st time, these are all the things that, as we start off in any given session, we're trying to bring into place. These are the very basic ingredients that we want to try and cultivate through the later exercises. So these opening exercises are very useful, as well as having that mild, gentle aerobic quality. They also give us a chance to just review the basics, whether we think we know them or not, and just to check in with how they're working within our movements. And then with the other foot forwards. We find a steady rhythm beginning to develop. And this is one of those aspects of Tai Chi that I think can help us develop a sense of connection in our bodies, so that we gradually build this picture of our bodies as a whole thing, rather than a foot down there and an arm up here operating differently. We move as one unit. In fact, again, these three elements, the three treasures, sometimes referred to body, mind, and energy, actually become one thing. Give you an exercise. Looking a little bit more closely at terms like releasing, softening, relaxing, they're all ways of understanding the Chinese term sung, and we might choose to label in a particular way in particular circumstances, but no description can ever tell you the whole thing about Tai Chi. It's a physical experience. So coming back to standing with the feet parallel, that hip width between you, and to begin with, just rocking your weight forwards and backwards a few times. And what you'll discover is when you go a long way, you start to stumble, stiffen up. So moderate the movement as you just sway forwards and backwards, roughly feeling the weight moving between the front part of your heels and the balls of your feet. And see if you can just find a kind of midpoint, a center point. I mentioned the midline. I said about the parallel lines and one going up the middle. If you think about it from the side, then if I were to just gently move that from side to side, in theory, this obviously practice is a lot more difficult, but in theory, there's a point round about here where I could just take my hand away and it wouldn't fall over. And again, there's obviously a lot of different factors involved in them. There's a point of balance, a point of equilibrium. Just see if you can let your body come to rest there, and then bringing your attention to the upper part of your body, ribs, shoulders, upper back. Don't do this as a strong exercise, but very gently just pull your shoulders in so you tense up there, and then release that tension. Do that a few times and look to focus on that feeling of releasing. Releasing, letting go, softening. You might call it yielding, is another term that we use. And one of the characteristics, I always get a sense of flowing inwards, and just recognizing that when I release that tightness, I retain my shape. I retain the shape of the rib cage and so on. So I become aware that it's something within the body continuing to support. And then coming to this area, lower back and belly, hips and buttocks, and eventually that will include the area down through your thighs to your knees, doing the same thing again. So this is a key part of the body for us to focus on. And as you release, notice again what happens in the upper part of your body, the shoulders and so on. And again, we generally find that when we're tight in this central area, we're tight everywhere. Knees as well will tend to soften. And again, a sense of dropping inwards and downwards. So we get that sense of our center of gravity beginning to drop. And this is what we call rooting down in Tai Chi. So in the first instance, rooting down doesn't necessarily mean that we bend the knees a long way. We will get to that. But look for that feeling of releasing, dropping down. You can imagine your pelvis hanging from the spine, like a bucket hangs from the rope in the well. Focusing on that dropping feeling, in particular, lower back, hips, buttocks, the feeling that that whole area from lower back down to the buttocks is overhanging side. Almost like you're sitting on a fence, except that on a fence you'll be leaning forwards probably, but the sense that there's a space below them, but a space that's supported by your feet. And then as you start to feel that sense of dropping down, let your hips drop back a little bit more. And then push it up. Dropping back, soften your knees. Don't overdo this. Be careful of your knees. This is a very strong movement in our legs, and the deeper we go, the stronger it is. And again, particularly new people, what you want to be aware of is that it takes a while for the muscles to condition. Problem would be that if you simply bend your knees too far, then you'll start to strain in your knees. And the idea is you get a feeling of our weight dropping down in through the ground. So we're not having to carry that weight on our upper body, creating tension that way. And also so that as our center of gravity drops, as we root down more, we start to get both a sense of stability, but also realize that in doing so, eventually, like springs or like standing on a trampoline, bouncing on the trampoline, you will find yourself being pushed up again. So it's like this movement, this flow of energy comes up through your legs, filling the upper body. Your body expands and contracts, and then we bring our arms around, and as you feel the next expansion, let it just push your elbows out, keep your fingers pointing towards each other, turn your hands over and sink down as your body contracts. So when you turn your hands, imagine you've got a ball in your arms and you're just pushing that ball up and then turning your hands over to rest them over the ball. So you're in water, just pressing the ball down into it. And remember, the upward movement and the downward movement comes from your hips and your legs, feet. Yielding, sinking down, allowing gravity to work through your body and allowing the movement upwards. So again, just try and remember that loose feeling in your arms. And to begin with, at least, just consider that really all your arms and hands are doing is creating a shape. You're not trying to strain in any particular. So this exercise is called rooting down because of the emphasis it gives on that key principle in Tai Chi, rooting down. Breathing just however is comfortable. The body knows how to breathe, and your breath would tend to follow the pattern of expansion and contraction. Feeling the movement gradually permeating all through your body, maybe helping just to ease those areas that are a bit stiff or a bit tight still. Giving you again this feeling of a link, a connection from the soles of your feet to your fingertips. That fluidity, like if you imagine water in a balloon, would respond all the way through the balloon if you happen to push into it. You can use an image of moving through water to give a sense of flow, but also a sense of resistance to the movement. When we're in water, we tend to soften in joints like our shoulders, fingers. We want to do the same thing here. And it's interesting to observe how our bodies respond to images. We use a great deal of imagery as always in Tai Chi. So when we're offered an image, if it resonates for us, what we try and do is cultivate those qualities within our body. Try not to get distracted by an image. You find that you're wondering what an image means, or how does that work, then best to leave it for the moment. Quite often these things take a while to become clear. But this time, turning your hands up, fingers outwards, and as you push up, your arms coming out to the sides. This is called the wild goose. So this image of a bird in flight can be a very strong one. That doesn't work for you, you could continue with that feeling of being in water with a little ball underneath the palm of each hand that you're pressing down and then allowing to rise slowly. Find that your attention has drifted off, gently bring it back, and this time notice that you can drop your hands down, let them cross in front of your belly, pushing up again, elbows going out, drawing your fingers around a nice smooth circle, as though you're painting a circle in front of you with your fingertips. This is called parting the clouds, and has a lovely sort of opening, expansive quality, but it's not a stretch. Notice that my elbows are still a little bit bent. Try not to stiffen up in your fingers. In general, we're not trying to stretch in these exercises, not because there's something wrong with stretching, but because, again, our immediate concern is with this sense of space within the body and allowing the movement to fill and ultimately to begin to expand that space through dissolving tightness, through erosion, if you like to think of it like that. One more time. Now go back to the first of these exercises, rooting down. So just let your elbows bend a little more to the ball holding shape. Do one of each of these in a little sequence. Turning your hands out, don't rush the change over. And just try and get a sense for the change within your body. You find that there's a common thread runs through all of these exercises, the rhythms, the style of movement. The source of the movement from our legs always. And yet also each individual exercise has its own resonances, its own unique patterns of movement associated within our body. So when we go through these three movements, one after the other, going into parting the clouds now, it gives us a chance just to reflect on that, to observe those changes. What we're able to observe, to be aware of, will begin to feed into our intention. And you find that we can begin to influence those internal movements through intention of one kind or another, be it imagery or Maybe just a straightforward instruction, or maybe just straightforward awareness. So we begin to recognize how mind can work with body to produce the movement from inside. One more round of this. This time, as you sink down in your hips, letting your hands drop all the way down, and then just on one side, feeling the expansion, pushing your arm up. Rotate your arm as though you're plucking something off a tree, and then go down. This is called dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Tension moves slowly to the other side, and the same thing. Extending through the whole of that side of your body. And the movement coming up through the left leg, knee, and hip, up through the side and the ribs, pushing your arm up, and then the contraction, drawing your arm. Take time to just move your attention across to the other side, and then start again. Try not to speed up or to shorten the transition from one side to another. Keeping a nice, steady, even pace. One more time on each side. Your arm come down and come into rest in this position with your hips just dropping slightly back. Try to maintain that position. Bring your hands to your sides and then around in front, pushing up just a little above your head. So hips dropping down, but hands pushing up, feeling the lengthening through your back. And then down, return to the starting position. Lift, let your elbows drop and push out sideways. So even though we're not actively sinking down and pushing up through our hips and legs, still we're allowing free passage downwards for the pull of gravity, not resisting that, and experiencing our body's response, which is that rising energy from the feet and legs. And again, just recognize, particularly in your back, this movement, slight contrast in the response to our arms lifting upwards and our arms pushing outwards. And this time, when you push out, you're going to add something. Try not to lose that quality of movement in your back, but just turn a little bit in your hips and notice how that redirects the movement of your arms. Hands and arms are doing exactly the same as they were before. Just turn in the other direction. This is called pushing in 4 direction. And then facing forwards and pushing out gives you the 4th direction. So this exercise draws our attention to, again, that central part of the body, the part of the body that's dropping towards the ground, and that influences the whole of the rest of our body. And here we can see that it will actually move our arms for us. Still that rhythm in your body, expanding, yang, contracting. Yeah. Trying to keep those evenly paced. Pushing in 4 directions. Still using, if appropriate, that image of moving through water, or just imagining the air around you is a little bit thicker than normal. This gradually helps us develop a stronger quality to the movement and flow, as well as paradoxically encouraging a kind of softer quality. Your hands drop down, feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders, and just letting the expansion push one arm out to the side, similar to dragon plucks the stars from the sky. You come down the center line because your arm starts by going outwards. It swings up till it's in line with your nose. Palms of your hand facing outwards as much as you can. Basically, your hand is tracing out a half circle. It's called circling. And then if you can do so without straining, once again, you add the turn. Notice how that draws your arm across slightly and back. When you hit those areas of stiffness and tightness, you can either just draw back from them. Again, wait patiently as the movement itself gradually erodes that tightness away. Changing sides now. Or if it feels comfortable for you, bringing your attention back to that feeling of releasing. And it might be that, for instance, you get to a certain point, maybe your shoulders come up and see there, if I can release there, sometimes, not always, sometimes I'll be able to get a little bit more movement. So that quality of sung, yielding, releasing, softening, can gradually help us to extend the range of our movement. This time, again, if it's comfortable, add in the turn. So one way or another, that sense of flow of movement within our body reaches deeply in the tissue, one kind or another. And still with your attention in that center part of your body, go back to the sinking down and pushing up. Before, when we were doing this, we would have wanted our pelvis to stay more or less level. And that meant that we could retain this upright position with a lot less strain. Now we're going to add in yet another rotation, a vertical rotation in the center of our body. Very gently push your hips back and you feel how your head goes forwards, sink down a little bit and then let your hips drop back and notice how that brings your head up and push up. I'm going to do this quite big so you can see what I'm doing, but just be careful of your knees and your back. Sinking down. My back stays straight. It's not a back bend. And then almost like I'm sitting back in the chair and just kind of flopping backwards and then pushing up. 1, 2, and 3. This time, your arms will get involved. As you push up, they come up a little bit like the wild goose. But as you sink down on 2, let's go back, and that brings your hands forward. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. The key thing here is not the extension of your arms or your head, your spine, but rather the action in your hips and pelvis. In particular, how by yielding to the pull of gravity through our hips, we can actually begin to bring ourselves up far. People with a bit more experience, you may wish to apply that quality of releasing as you go forward, particularly in back and shoulders, but always very carefully. Remember, this is not a competition. And again, that idea that we allow the movement to fill the space that's there. We don't force the space to be. This time, as you come back up, bring your hands in front of your belly, arm down, turn horizontally, then push the hips back so your hands are pushed forwards, swing across, come back to the center and let your hips drop. This is called polishing the table. Turn in, push back. Remember, I'm doing this quite big, so hopefully you can see the action in my hips. Show you from the back. I turn, hips go back, I drop down, swing around, come back to the center, let the hips bring me back up. Polishing the table, not overextending your arms. Very carefully and gently. Do one more to each side. And then just let your hands drop. Swing from your hips again a little bit, just to reset your back. Nice and loose. Back, shoulders and arms. Hips dropping back just a little bit. Soften your knees. Just aware of areas that are resisting that feeling of releasing. Shake out. I sometimes describe that releasing feeling as being like you hold your hand in a fist and squeeze tightly. You can feel the tightness going all the way through your body. We could just let it relax. You could just let the arm flop down, of course. But what we can do, if you look at the middle of my finger there, is to just create a bit of space there to loosen the fingers. I've still got the shape of the fist, but I've got a lot less stiffness and resistance to the movement. Now we're going to change the stance from the parallel stance. Imagine parallel lines going through the floor, through your feet. Turn one foot out and step forward with the other foot, toes pointing forwards. You can play around with this angle of the back foot. And again, knees are soft, hips are soft, and just once again, transferring your weight from one foot to another. Initially, you can think of this as a little kind of push from the foot, but do also try and give yourself time to settle, to release into each leg. So it's a 4-stage movement, not 2 stages. We move the weight, say, for instance, into the front foot. We look for that feeling of releasing the lower back, buttocks, and hips, knees. And then we go back and again, we release. And maybe just feeling the push coming out of that. Trying to maintain our pelvis as being level, so as much as possible avoiding leaning forwards. Going to about 60% of your weight in the front foot. When you go forwards, maybe as much as 70 in back, but no more than that at the moment. That feeling of releasing physically, it helps us to root down, to maybe find that movement, that energy coming back up. Now for the circulation and movement through your body, but also because it requires a conscious intention to do that, or sometimes a subconscious intention to do that. It just means that every time you transfer your weight, there's a moment of settling. So we come back to this quieter, more spacious quality in mind as well as in body. And the more we're able to direct our attention inwards in one way or another, the more we start to experience that stillness at the center of the movement. As you come back into your rear foot now, as your hip begins to drop, imagine it like one end of a seesaw, and the other end is your toes, front toes coming up a little bit. So more of your weight now in that rear leg. Notice I've got my front foot slightly turned out now. You go forwards, push your back knee forwards, let the heel come up. So gradually now increasing the percentage of weight flowing down through your leg as you come to rest for a moment, until we get to the point where the vast majority of the weight, maybe 90–95%, is in going down through that supporting leg. We've got the alignment of our posture, making sure that gravity isn't pulling us forwards or backwards or sideways. And so we can begin to just bring the other foot in. You can touch the toes down, and again, just check your posture. Step back, and then same thing with this one. Trying to return your foot to the same position each time. And the term that we often use for this in Tai Chi isn't that we step, but that we plant the foot. And again, that suggests a very intentional act. Trying to just get a feel of your foot sinking into the floor, as though you're doing this on soft sand. Try that on the other side. So it was roughly square in dimension, this stance, and beginning to transfer your weight, remembering to just pause slightly. Pause, perhaps the wrong word. Think of those moments of settling being like the comma in a sentence, just giving you a chance to settle before you move again. Tai Chi writings, the ancient writings of Tai Chi tradition, is the lovely phrase that we seek the stillness within the movement. And then raising toes and heels as your hips release, and you get that feeling of dropping down like the seesaw, goes down at one end, up at the other. So the releasing feeling initiates the movement of our feet and legs. It initiates the step. It's time contracting your leg to bring it in, push it out, and then to the side. So you're doing this on thin ice, and what you want to do is to test the ice. With the front foot, your heel goes down, the toes go down, push in just a little bit, and then you let the weight go forwards. Same thing with the backward step, except the ball of the foot goes down and then your heel. So just giving yourself a chance to pay attention to this everyday movement for most of us, or many of us, or simply taking a step. And then just step through whichever direction you have space in, going forwards. And here you can see perhaps as our back foot comes in, it swings through and out, it traces a semicircle. Change direction. Same thing going backwards. Foot comes in, back and out, tracing the semicircle. Just as the up and down movement from our legs moved our arms first, provided the energy, if you like, for the movement in the upper part of the body, so does the transfer of the weight from one foot to another. So now, turn your left foot out, step forward. So mirror my movements and go back into the stance. Sink your weight back, have your hands at the sides. Again, you can imagine doing this in water. The weight moves forwards, but your arms hang behind just a moment, and then as you settle into the front, your arms swing through. Same idea going back. This is fisherman cast and in. So you can imagine throwing a sheet over a bed or rolling out a carpet. Nice and easy and gently. A wave-like flow from your back leg through your body into your fingers and settling in the front leg, and then the same idea going back. Soften your shoulders, your wrists, your fingers. See if you can again recognize that quality of movement in your arms as they're moved by the rest of your body. People more experienced with this exercise, it's a very simple exercise, but you discover that there's a great deal going on in your back, in the front of your body, in the sides, if you can bring your attention to that. This time, as you come back, bring your hands in front of your hips, drop your wrists down so palms start to face forwards, and just let your arms be pushed forwards and they curve up. This is called pushing wave. So now that wave-like movement through your body begins to push your elbows away. Not trying to lift our arms or our hands, just a natural response to the arm being pushed from your leg. Sometimes called pushing a wave. So you could imagine pushing into water, giving this a more focused, stronger quality than the previous exercise. Remember, your arms will naturally curve when they move because they're attached at one end and not at the other. Do one more of these, and this time as you come back again with your attention in the center of your body, turn to your left and just let that curving movement swing your arms up just below your shoulders, go forwards and turn as your hands start to descend, drawing your hands across your hips, turn to swing them up a little bit, and we have what we think of as a sideways figure of 8 movement, or some people like to think of the infinity sign used in mathematics and physics. Shake out. So each of those 3 movements develops out of the previous one in one way or another, a free-flowing movement with fisherman cast and net, a little bit more shaped with pushing wave, and then the turn in the center, giving us again a different shape for the figure of 8. So now have your other foot forwards, turn your right foot out, step forwards with the left, sinking back and fisherman cast the net. Just trying to keep your attention within your body. And if you do that, you find there's plenty going on to sustain that attention. Next time you come back, change into pushing wave. And then coming back, turning, your arms swing through the figure of 8, not overextending your arms. Again, the image of moving through water or imagining the air thicker than normal works for you. You can use that. Noticing still how that quality of attention and the intention associated with it begins to really affect your movements. Memory of the expansion and contraction, those patterns within the body, feeds into your attention. Turn your front foot out a little bit, and this time, if it's comfortable, bring the foot in, goes the other direction actually, step through, out the foot, and forwards. Again, depending on which way you're going, bring the empty foot in and step. What you may find that you're able to do, and it's by no means necessary, but you may find you're just able to raise your leg, hips dropping back, remember. Push through. As you raise your leg, try not to stiffen up in your hip. And if you find it's really slowing the flow of the movement, and just keep your toes lightly on the ground. This time I'm going to change direction, otherwise I'm going to bump into the camera. Hips dropping down means your center of gravity lowers. It helps to counteract any sense of strain in raising your leg, again like a seesaw. Hips drop down, knee comes up. And then bring your feet out. Give you this. Now just rubbing your hands together. And the pads of your fingers tapping over your face. And then I use the palms of my hands going up over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, arm. And the other side. Excuse me. Once you're back, just as much of your back as you can comfortably reach. Quite light there. And then going around your hip. And your legs. And light on your belly. I need the upper part of the chest. Our closing exercise is called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. I feel that none of us maintain any of these qualities permanently. And we lose them very easily in both qualities of body and mind, the calmness, the root, and so on and so forth. So she teaches us how to get them back. So from here, just sink down again. 4 stages, you push up again, a little bit like the wild goose. Then bringing your hands around as though you're holding the ball against your chest. Let your elbows drop, squeeze the ball in, and once again, return into the mountain. Just aware of how gravity works in your body and yielding to gravity before you begin to strain. Notice what it is that brings you back to this quieter, more stable state before you push out again. It could be the pull of gravity in your body, could be the image of the mountain, could be other things. It's a useful idea, a useful thing to just take away from the session. Something you can recall in those moments when you seem to be very distant from those qualities. Keep it simple and straightforward. One more time. And thank you very much for watching and joining in, everybody. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to contact me. I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.